So let us begin with the relatively easy, that being the installation and configuration of the remote access role. I have here a server remote1.company.pri that I currently have on my domain with the 192.168.0.106. It's just a hard-coded address. And here in just a minute, we'll go through up here under the Manage tab how you can add the role and role service associated with the remote access role. But before we go through that Add Roles and Features wizard, one of the things that we have to have on this server is not just a single network card, but in fact two network cards to support a couple of the demonstrations we'll go through here in just a second. In order to do that, I want to once again break the fourth wall here and kind of dig into the backstage VMware Workstation solution that's running these machines so that we can take a look at one of the ways in which we can create this multi-network card configuration. Let me pop up here. I'm clicking right now on the Edit view for inside of VMware Workstation and then opening up the Virtual Network Editor. This Virtual Network Editor, which I'll drag over here, this is associated with VMware Workstation and not with the machine you're looking at. Here in the Virtual Network Editor, you see I got a couple of different VM nets that I've configured, and yours may look slightly different. I've configured them so that the VMnet number here is associated with the subnet address over here. So VMnet1 then corresponds with 192.168.1. And you needn't necessarily configure all of these, but you may want to configure one or two of these different VM nets because we may need to use them in order to support just doing demonstrations of different servers on different networks. So we'll begin here with this VMnet1, which we will consider to be our external network, so the rest of the internet as it were. This 192.168.1 net, as you and I probably know, is a private network address, but at least here in this world, this network address allows us to simulate a client that is outside of our 192.168.0 net address. We may also a little later on talk about the 2 net as well, so we can just play around with some of the routing when we get to that routing task. Now, once I've configured this and set up this VMnet1 in the appropriate way as a host-only network, well, then the next step in this process is to actually configure a network card for this virtual machine that is on that network. I will right-click up here on the properties of this virtual machine and choose Settings here so that we can see the settings associated with this virtual machine that is our server remote1. On that, I'm going to go ahead and add an additional network adapter here that is not going to be bridged to the rest of the network, but instead will be connected up to that host-only network, which is VMnet1, right down here. Now, any host that's going to be on this network is not going to be able to attach to the rest of the world. It's kind of an isolated host-only network here, so a little later on, we'll put a client on that network so that we can essentially see what it's like to be in that isolated world and route the traffic back here into the rest of our environment. But for now, let's create this VMnet1 host-only network card and attach it to our server remote1. This process takes just a second for it to attach the card, and then once it's done, we should be able to then go back here into our network properties and then take a look at the new network card that we have. Let me take a look here. You can see here it's actually installing this network card. Here is the second network card that is on that one net. What we should probably do now is provide an address for this network card and then also name the two network cards appropriately so that it's easier to do once we get into the actual installation and configuration of the remote access role. So let's do this here. If we view properties and change the IP address here for the IPv4 address, let's change this to 192.168.1.106. So same fourth octet here, and just changing the third octet here so we can keep our IP addresses straight. Same 255 net subnet mask, and then we'll leave the default gateway to nothing here because we don't actually have a default gateway just yet. For our DNS server addresses too, we'll just leave this blank again for now, because at least here at this point, for this subnet, we don't actually have a DNS server that can route yet in and out of the one net. I'll choose OK here to configure this as 1.106, and we'll call this, I'm just going to rename the card here. This is our server net card, and this is our extranet card, so extranet. The extranet card being that which connects us out to the rest of the world. With this configuration now done, we can now go about actually installing and configuring the remote access role.